What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of GLE. As you go lead everything today, just remember the Go Lead Everything podcast only grows by word of mouth. If you get value from the show, share it out either on social or directly with somebody you think might appreciate it. Give it a follow, subscribe, rate, review on all the platforms. Even if you don't frequent those platforms, it helps the show grow. We're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, and most importantly, take the lessons you learn from the show and implement them into your life. Great ideas are meaningless without great execution. You probably know the saying, knowledge is power. Well, I say knowledge is only potential energy. It's only powerful when acted upon. So today, as you go, act on the knowledge, implement these nuggets into your life, and share the show. I am pumped for today's show, y'all. We have a leader and entrepreneur. He is the CEO of Genesis Power Solutions. This guy has knocked on over 85,000 doors, either personally recruited or supported the recruitment of over 800 salespeople. And his teams have generated more than 150 million in revenue. He's an extremely skilled communicator, got so much leadership wisdom to share, and considers it his calling in life to help others discover and experience their greatness. He also has an awesome name and even better initials. Thrilled to have another PS on the show today. Peter Swenson, welcome to GLE.
Hey, it's good to be here. I think that was the first interaction that we had included, hey, you got a nice name. It sounds like mine, right?
Right, exactly. You meet some Swansons, not many Swenson. I don't know a bunch of Swensons.
It kind of depends on what part of the country you're in. Yeah, yep, Swedish.
Yeah, same origin, I imagine. Well, great to have you, Peter. Before we jump in, y'all go follow Peter. He's on Instagram, P as in Paul, V as in Victor, Swenson, Swenson. You can find him, Peter Swenson, on LinkedIn, Facebook. His company at Genesis Power Solutions, or www.gps.solar.
There it is.
And I'm really excited to get into it today with you, Peter. Now, 85,000 doors is, quite the historical experience for somebody. How did you get into that world? Just give me a kind of the overview of your story and for our audience as we're kicking this off.
Yeah. So when I was 19, I was pre-med in college. My sophomore year, I still thought I was going to be a doctor, and I met OChem that year and decided shortly after, meeting OChem that I wasn't going to be a doctor. So my plans kind of changed. And after my sophomore year, my cousin had recommended that I meet with his friend who did this crazy door-to-door job during the summers selling books. I came to find out it's a publishing company based in Nashville. It's actually the oldest direct sales company in America. So the company's name is Southwestern. They are in Nashville, and when it was founded, the company was in the southwest corner of America. That's why it's called Southwestern. It was Civil War veterans selling Bibles to pay for college. That's where it started. Wow. And then even to today, they have college students that sell books and now educational packages and coaching and software door to door. So I did that for 3 summers while I was in school, and the schedule for that job was crazier than the job itself. I would say it was part of what made the job crazy. We woke up and took a cold shower at 6 a.m. And we drove out to a breakfast spot with a few roommates. You leave that breakfast spot about 25 minutes after you get there, and you are knocking on your first door, that first prospect, by 7:59 a.m. Wow. And then you work until 9:31 p.m. So you never start at 8, you always start before. You never stop at 9:30, you always stop after. Mm-hmm. So 13 and a half hours a day, 6 days a week. Wow. Which is a crazy amount of work. And I finished my first summer in a state of shell shock. But it was after that summer that I began to notice, like, my perception of the world, of adversity, of challenge, money, sales, communication, it had all shifted so dramatically. Right. And I like to say I developed a healthy addiction to personal growth and development. And it started there. For me, that was fake. I was, lucky enough to be valedictorian I say lucky because I think a lot of it had to do with my aptitude more than my work ethic. There's definitely, it took work, but I know other people that worked a lot harder than me, and knocking on doors in sales business, as you probably know, that's not something that you can fake. You've got to put in the sweat equity.
Right.
And I discovered what that felt like in the business world. And then I stuck around and did that for many, many years. And that evolved. And there's, some bumps in the road we can dive into if you wanted to, but that evolved into home security. So I knocked on doors for another 5 or 6 years with home security, and then got into upper leadership and regional management, divisional management leadership. And 2.5 years ago, left that business and launched Genesis with my brother, my best friend apart from my wife. And he and I have been in business and done life together the entire time. And with another partner, we've done a little over 80 million in sales in the first 2 and a little under 2.5 years. So we're cruising, we're growing. And, but I view business, and more specifically sales and direct sales, especially, as what I saw and discovered it as 19, a vehicle to chisel yourself inside of, an opportunity to go battle that inner ego every single day, and the judgment and the internal questions and the challenge and the adversity. You find out what you're made of, and some people come back for more. And so I came back for more for a long time. And then I discovered in the entrepreneurial world, it's a lot more of the same opportunity. You begin to have more holistic growth. It's not just sales and sales leadership. It's more holistically, it's business and marketing and accounting and managing people that aren't just commissioned. So I've got a whole nother future of evolution in front of me as we build Genesis. But that's my short professional story.
Yeah, crazy story, dude. How you were doing cold showers and cold plunge before it was even cool?
Yeah.
How did that happen? Who was making you do that?
So Southwestern, their culture is, I'll say this tongue in cheek, they put the cult in culture, right? It is like 6 a.m. cold showers. You're dancing.
Yeah.
Like dancing and shouting chants in the parking lot of your breakfast spot every day. Like they know how to, like Tony Robbins would call it now, getting in state, and shifting your physiology, shifting your the biochemistry in your brain. Sure. They may have not described it that way, but that's what we did. And they had been doing that for years and years and years and years and years. They still take cold showers today. I think, I'm in the midst of I think I'm 14 days in now to at least a 30-day challenge that I set for myself to do a cold plunge every morning. So I'm in my 48-degree pool for about 3 minutes. That's and awesome. That, flashbacks to college.
Yeah, man. I'm doing a similar thing with cold showers. I was just up in Michigan not too long ago, and those cold showers up there hit a little different, though. It's not quite the same as a cold plunge all the way in, but it's cold.
Texas at least has a bit chillier water than Arizona. You come to the summertime in Arizona, and it's not even a cold shower. You can't do it. So
it's like
I need to get. My ambition is to get a cold plunge, a legitimate one, now before it gets too warm out, because I think I'm addicted to the adrenaline and the serotonin and just all of that boost in the morning.
It feels good, right? Like most people think it's crazy, but the mental exercise, similar to your experience kind of chiseling yourself with door-to-door sales, it's just kind of like, okay, I don't want to do this, but I'm not going to hesitate, and I'm just going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Like just that mental repetition of doing something you don't want to do, kind of just, it trains that discipline muscle that so many people kind of never build. Don't you think?
Yeah. So I've done a bunch of Tony Robbins courses, and the most recent one I did, Business Mastery. Okay. Because I've heard Tony say this phrase that I'm about to tell you many, many times. It's recorded in all sorts of videos, but when he said it this time, it just struck me different. So there's 2 things that happen to get to have me make the decision to get into my pool every morning right now at 48 degrees. Number one is that I had a friend tell me that he did it in December and for a month straight. I'm like, that actually sounds pretty cool. And honestly, I've thought about doing that. I've never done it. Right. I've jumped in my pool, but once a winter, and I've done cold showers, but it's not quite the same thing. That it is the cold plunge is significantly more intense than a cold shower. But in Tony Robbins' course, he talked about cold plunging. He's done it for 15 or 20 years, every single morning. He's got one in every home that he owns. And he said he doesn't negotiate with myself. He's like, I've never wanted to get into the thing. I've never wanted to. I didn't wake up wanting to get into the cold plunge, but I've many, many years ago decided I do not negotiate with myself. And it was funny because I've heard him say that before. I understand the concept. We always negotiate with ourselves, right? It's the little voice in your head, but when he said that, it struck something newly. And I can't remember the Greek poet or philosopher that said this phrase, but there's a phrase you may have heard: no man ever steps into the same river twice, for it is not the same river and he is not the same man. And something about when Tony said this to me, it clicked, and I realized the bickering in my head that oftentimes I'll lose that battle, right? If we get into this discussion or a negotiation with the voice in our head, we oftentimes lose because it's speaking from, the egoic place, and it's seeking comfort in it. But if you recognize that the negotiation itself is already a loss, that's what clicked for me. I mean, the refusal to negotiate was a thing I hadn't considered. I tried to win in that negotiation,
right?
But you don't win enough to ever get the benefit of that battle. So, like, in that moment, I'm like, all right, cold plunge, here I come.
Right.
And I've been practicing that concept now of not trying to battle or win the battle, but to shut the battle down, right? And just say out loud sometimes, I refuse to negotiate. I refuse to negotiate with myself and go do the thing.
Right. Yeah, I love that. That's absolutely awesome advice. I don't think many people are even aware that they have that internal dialogue. They're probably not even conscious of it. And recently, I've been implementing some similar sort of routine type of things in my schedule, because I had to get like real with myself. I've kind of gone on this pseudo entrepreneurial journey the last couple of years, and if you really want to accomplish things that are significant beyond just average results, you got to do the work, right? There's no faking it. You said it at the beginning. And so this line from Jordan Peterson, I'm not sure if you're a Jordan Peterson fan or not, but he has this piece of advice where he's like, if you don't think you know what you need to do, just go in your bedroom and sit on your bed and just think in quiet by yourself for a minute, and try to think of one thing that you need and could and should implement in your life. And if you did, your life would be better, and just go do it. And you probably won't want to do it. You probably won't necessarily like it if you sit and kind of negotiate with yourself too long. But I thought it was a really good exercise, and I went through it recently and had it. It's part of the reason I've made some changes and started getting up earlier and trying to just implement and build discipline and consistency. Because I kind of woke up and realized all my years through sports, and you in your early days of sales, right? They made you do the cold plunge, right?
Yeah.
And so now it's like, okay, how do I make myself get up at 5 or get up at 4 and do those hard things that made me think I was disciplined back in the day? But it was like I had an external motivation, coaches telling me to do it, punishment if I didn't show up on time, right? And then when I grew up into adulthood, I never built that discipline, and I really lost that discipline along the way, or maybe even never really had it. So building consistency and discipline is just so huge. Have you been the type of guy that's had a consistent routine over your life? And if so, or if not, how has that helped you or hindered you?
It's a really good question. The answer is, to most people would look at my life, and any month, 3-month or year segment, they would say that I am pretty regimented. I've got a good schedule. But if I was to compare, month by month by month, it's constantly shifting. And I definitely have moments when I fall off the horse. It's something that I still struggle with today is reminding myself that life is a game of recovery. And just like golf, if you're winning at some point, if you're winning, you're going to win until you fail. And if you allow that failure to be your new reality rather than just brushing it off, getting up and starting again, people get stuck for lifetimes, right? Yeah. Because they didn't do it perfect or they fell off the horse. So I'm a guy, like, right or wrong, I fall off the horse a lot. I also get back on, and I oftentimes get back on bigger horses. My cold plunge right now is something that I'll do probably until the pool gets warm. Mm-hmm. I've got my workout regimen. I am a big believer in the value of a morning routine. Right now I spend time, in the Word or the Bible 3 or 4 days a week. Ideally it's 7, but truthfully it's probably 3 or 4. Mm-hmm. Ideally I'm working out 5 days a week, but typically it's 3. But the structure for that schedule, right? The thoughtful intention I've put into designing my schedule helps me to remember the value of those pieces of it. And that's where I tend to find a lot of values. If I've done thoughtful creation of my ideal schedule, right? Assuming I didn't have 4 kids that have random things happening and different meetings or events that I've got to fit into a traditional schedule. If I can come up with my ideal schedule, which is a practice that I do consistently, I have a deep understanding of the value of every part of that of the day. And if I have to miss it, I didn't just fall off the wagon for 5 weeks or for 5 months. I'm much better at getting back on a day later if I've thought through the value.
That's really good advice. So many people are so quick to just stop or quit or give up or, oh, I blew it. And then they live in this guilt or shame or despair or, why bother, as opposed to just being able to just, like you said, recover and hop back on. That's such good advice. I've struggled with that a ton.
Alex Hormozy, you know who Alex Hormozy is?
Hormozy Nation. Yeah. I love Alex.
So he said he's got tons of brilliant content, but one of the things that hit hard a couple of years ago, the first time I heard it, was this concept. He said, if you are so regimented in your schedule or in your workout exercise regimen or your diet that when you fall off, it's a big deal and you make it this big thing, you're almost better off not having that in the beginning to begin with. Right. Because when you fall off, you're off, as opposed to recognizing this is just a daily practice. And your life's going to be full of these moments where it's not perfect. And your job is to recover quick and get back on.
Right. Yeah, that's such good advice. I love it. So let's switch gears to, you mentioned your morning study. I know you're a man of faith and you're a family man, 4 kids. That is impressive. I know, being a dad of 1, I can only imagine how hard it is to keep a regimented routine with 4. So how did you start your faith journey? Maybe let's give the audience an overview of your faith journey, and we can kind of see where we go from there.
Yeah. So I grew up going to church in a Lutheran church in rural Minnesota, a town of 2,400 people. And it was very much, church was a thing we did. It was a place we went on Sundays. And I don't think that I didn't experience a deep relationship with God, but I did feel connected. When I went to college, I went to a private Catholic college. And so I definitely didn't connect to Catholicism. And that was beginning of probably when I started questioning my faith in general. A couple years later, I watched some documentaries on YouTube called Zeitgeist, which were very intriguing. It was about the Federal Reserve and about a whole bunch of conspiracy-esque type of things, which, if I prefer to call that critical thinking. I think there's some very good questions that can be asked and are hard to answer. But one of the focal points of that documentary series was Christianity, and it just had me ask really, really tough questions of myself, about my faith, about Christianity, about organized religion in general. And I came to the conclusion that it was all man-made. I mean, God, I felt God enough in my life to believe that there was a universal, entity, God, a creator. But beyond that, I figured that human beings had made the rest up in their search for significance and meaning and the value to society and everything else. And I could go on longer about all of those thoughts. And so for 13 years, that's where I stayed. I didn't call myself, I blended in with Christians the entire time. I remember having my parents from Minnesota down to Arizona, where I've now been for 14 years. And my dad and mom were staying with us after we had our first child. And we got into a conversation about faith. And he asked me at one point if I considered myself Christian. And I said that I knew my faith through Christ, but that I didn't consider myself Christian. Like I had a relationship with God because of Christianity, but that I didn't believe. And he didn't sleep that night. I still don't remember. I still will not forget this. Like the next morning I wake up, I'm bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. He looks like he's stayed up all night crying, which is basically what had happened. And I felt I could feel his love and compassion for me. And that and many, many other times, I wanted to believe. In some ways I wanted to forget so that I could believe, just because it would be easier.
Sure.
But I never wanted to believe so that I could have something that I felt like I was missing.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until later that I really came to terms with the fact that I had a void in my life that wasn't being filled by any of my attempts to find a relationship with God through nature, through yoga, through prayer, through blending in with Christians. Like
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't real, and that didn't really hit me. There's two or three events. I've worked with personal coaches. I've paid coaches performance and personal, and for almost a decade now. It's been an incredible investment, and I've gotten a ton of value out of those relationships, much of it business and much of it non-business. One of those relationships, a good friend of mine still, Chip, I had been working through some work stuff, and there was a conversation we had where it became really evident to both of us in this conversation that I was getting clear that I was missing this relationship with God. He's a very spiritual man.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that he is Christian, but spiritual for sure. And in that conversation, he said, Peter, your next big breakthrough, this next big journey of your life, the next evolution, it's going to be spiritual. I can tell. And I believed him when he said it. I felt it. And two other things. One of them I don't often share, but I'll just share it for the sake of I'm not afraid to share my full story. So I'm like,
keep it real on GLE. I love it, man.
It is it's kind of an odd thing, but I was laying in bed shortly after that conversation with Chip, and I had committed to him and to myself. I don't know what it means, but I am ready to find faith. I'm ready to find a real relationship with God. I don't know if that means I'm going to be Buddhist or, Christian. Kind of seems most obvious because I grew up that way, and a lot of America's that way in my family. But I didn't really know where. I just knew that I was ready to walk that path. And I was laying in bed one night, not quite asleep. Definitely not asleep because I was fully aware of everything. And at that, I've slept for a long time with like my ankles crossed and my hands on my chest, kind of like a mummy.
Oh, really?
And I felt in a very, very real experience of the presence of God. I mean, my wife's sleeping right next to me. I'm laying there. My eyes are shut, but I'm not asleep. And I just feel this presence.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, prove it. In my mind, I didn't say it out loud, but it was very conscious, like, prove it.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt significant pressure on my tops of my feet or my ankles and my hands, which is, I guess, what I interpreted to be where, the nails would have gone, when Christ was on the cross. And it didn't disappear. It was, it felt like a minute or so. It was just an intense pressure. And I definitely believe in the power of hypnotism, and we can put ourselves into hypnotic states. So I don't know if that was God or if that was me, but it was real to me for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And that was another big moment, because I'm like, okay, maybe somebody's pursuing me as well. Maybe it's not just me pursuing God. Maybe God's pursuing me.
Mm-hmm.
And so then fast forward about 6 months, and maybe it's 8 months from that point. I am now working in the home security space that I'd been for a decade prior, the organization that I built, and we had 6 years of growth, same time that nearly every other region of salespeople was diminishing for one reason or another. We grew, but at the end of that, when there was really nobody left but us, we started shrinking as well. And this year I was back out in the field. So I told you I kind of got off the field at one point. Now I'm back in the field. I've got 4 kids in Arizona.
Wow.
I am back in the field. And what that means is I'm living with 5 or 6 college age students in Texas in an Airbnb for, 2 to 4 weeks at a time. And
wow.
As I'm in the Airbnb, I'm knocking on doors, I'm leading the meetings and the trainings, and realizing that this thing that I'd built, that I've spent 15 years of my life building a direct sales, a business and an organization, and I've identified as this guy for such a long time. And not only has what I built kind of crumbled, or it's on the verge of having to get rebooted from the ground up. And the guy who I thought I was, I've not accomplished that. And I remember vividly, going to church, because again, I blended in, and I was seeking, I was looking for faith, but I certainly didn't know how I could ever believe it again. I'm like, I can't just strip away these good questions. I can't just fake my way back in a relationship with God. But I went to church that morning, altar call as usual for as long as I can remember. Every time, good or bad altar call, I always felt a desire, but never a willingness, but always a desire.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing that day. And I got back to this Airbnb and I'm taking a shower, listening to some loud meditative music. And I just got crushed. I started crying. I was just overwhelmed with the experience that this identity and the life that I had tried to form, it was around something that I had made up, right? My definition of success,
Mm-hmm.
my definition of impact, my definition of contribution. And certainly to some degree, I'd been wrong. I'd been wrong about strategy, maybe wrong about the company, maybe wrong about the industry or about the people. And what I'd been aligning my life to was dissolving. And I didn't want the weight of having to decide what my life should be about on my shoulders anymore. And it felt like a really heavy burden that I'd never noticed before.
Mm-hmm.
And I got on my knees naked taking a cold shower, by the way, on my knees, music blasting, arms in the air. And I said it. I was ready to believe, but I didn't believe yet. But I said the words, I give up, I give in, God. I'm ready to follow you and love you. And I don't know if that means this seems kind of crazy, but I'm in. It's paraphrasing what I said. And
Wow.
And nothing miraculous happened, right? Angels didn't blow trumpets from heaven. And I didn't wait, we didn't just have a tremendous summer and everybody smiled and sang kumbaya. But if in my journey, if I had been comparing it to like a game of, a football field,
Mm-hmm.
I had been slowly moving my way to the 50-yard line. And that moment of surrender for me was maybe 2 inches, right? I maybe went 6 inches, but I got over the 50.
Mm-hmm.
And my heart began to open, like the burden began to lessen. And I did some things that I had never considered before, which is read some of the incredible books that have been written by former atheists who became Christian because they actually researched and looked for the tough answers or the good answers to the tough questions. So I read C.S. Lewis,
Right.
Mere Christianity.
Great book.
It blew my mind. If I got to if I was at the 49-yard line, that one took me to the 1. I got it, and I felt so stupid, Phil, because I had spent 13 years like avoiding answers to the questions that originally tore me away from my faith.
Wow.
And you've heard the idiom, smart men learn from their own mistakes. Mm-hmm. Wise men learn from the mistakes of others. Mm-hmm. And the ugly part about my beliefs for such a long time is I would have said maybe quietly to myself that I'm too smart to be a Christian. Mm. Like I'm not going to fall for it.
Sure.
And I wish I'd been more wise, because had I sought wisdom from others, I don't think I would have wandered for so long. I got baptized shortly after. My wife also read Mere Christianity, fell on her knees and gave her life to Christ, in our kitchen right after I read the book. I baptized her a few moments after I was baptized. Wow. And, we're now active in our faith. I've got a live and living relationship with God. I understand I think I understand. I'm beginning to understand the nature of the relationship that God wants to have with me and with all of us. And, through C.S. Lewis, specifically, I'll wrap up with this, as I was always stuck on Christianity being so much about Christ. I'm like, can we just agree that God is amazing and Christ was good, and we don't have to just talk about him so much and right. Say his name over and over. And like, I was like repulsed by that. And I understand now that like Jesus he's just necessary for us to have an eternal relationship with God. Mm-hmm. It's C.S. Lewis explores that in powerfully. Mm-hmm. And I could go on for a long time, but
that's an amazing story, Peter. Amazing.
I'm here now and I'm never leaving. So my touchdown. So to finish my metaphor, right now I'm in the end zone and we get to do a touchdown dance till the day we die. Right.
That's so awesome, man.
It's fun.
That's awesome. So, so many things come to mind as you're telling that story. It's a powerful testimony. And, I think as you were thinking about, I'm too smart to be a Christian. I think it's funny. I was just on a plane with a guy who considers himself agnostic, and we had a great conversation.
Yeah.
But, you know, everybody who has struggled with their faith, I think, always has a similar thought to that. And it's like a pride cometh before a fall thing, or,
Yeah.
you're either making a god of something else, or typically you're making a god of yourself, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to trusting in a true God. And if you make a god of yourself, and knowing that we're imperfect, it's like, how do you even trust yourself? You can't even trust yourself to keep your daily habits consistently, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty amazing, that story, and just kind of how it came full circle. And it's funny, I baptized my wife too.
Okay.
So we have that in common. That's kind of cool.
That's awesome.
You don't meet somebody else that baptizes their spouse every day. But yeah, C.S. Lewis is great. Not many people should probably recommend him to that guy I was speaking with on the plane, because C.S. Lewis, sought out to disprove Christianity.
Yeah.
And ended up converting himself by studying God's word. Right.
So many have.
Right.
Like, so many have.
Sure.
When that you're like, okay, what's the likelihood? Because in the beginning of my journey, one of the things that struck me is, what's the likelihood that I happen to be the one that gets it better than anybody else, right? Because whether you are your own God or you've designed your own religion, you've designed your set of beliefs. I mean, if you were to ask me what I believed was true about religion, about Christianity, about God, I could have written a lot of stuff. And at the end of it, you're like, well, that's sounds like the religion of Peter. What's the likelihood that you're more right than the billions of people and the thousands of years of history in Christianity? It's even from a probability standpoint, it's microscopic, the chance. It's non-existent.
I love it, man. Well, thanks be to God that he found his lost sheep, Peter Swenson, and his wife.
Yeah.
And seek and ye shall find, right? So those out there, if you're doubting your faith out there in the GLE nation, seek, just seek it out. Go study on your own and search for the answers. The search for truth is the search we all should be on. It's the one I'm on. I know Peter's on the same one. And we got to have truth. You got to have a firm foundation of truth to stand on. Otherwise, you can't stand for anything, right? When times get tough. So I absolutely love that. You also mentioned earlier, like, just like how valuable it's been investing in yourself and mentors. And I think most who have like the go to college, get a good job mentality, which is all good, they're willing to take out a huge loan and invest into this college education, right? But when it comes to actually investing money in other coaching or other resources to improve themselves along the way, they seem to have like a big hesitation. Can you give some context or maybe some experiences you've had, investing in yourself that's really just, created huge, tremendous leaps or value in your life?
Yeah. More than I can possibly count. And in almost every part of my life, there's been tremendous impact. And that is, so I'll choose a couple big ones, but I've been a participant in ongoing education courses and events for, since I really say it started with the events and the training that I got when I was knocking on doors as a college student. But shortly after I got to Arizona, I participated in the Landmark Forum. Landmark has been around for 20 or 30 years. I participated, I think, in a dozen or so courses over a 10-year period. I've been to 6, 7, 8 different Tony Robbins events at this point. And on top of that, another half a dozen one-time events or courses and personal and professional coaches for 80% of the last decade as well. So I continue to pour money and resources and time into that. And part of the reason is because when you look at top performers, whether it's an athlete, a business professional, somebody in really any iconic performer or substantive leader, they have coaches. They have a team of people that helps them to be who it is they are. And it's just hard to argue against that. If you don't believe that you're meant for significant impact on the planet or in your community, then maybe that's the cop out, but I think we're all made for a lot more than we realize. And there's many different versions and levels of coaching. It doesn't have to be one-on-one even. There's a tremendous amount of content. Jordan Peterson is a good example. Like you said, you've got access to the most brilliant minds on the planet at the tip of your fingers for free. It just costs you that one Netflix show that you shouldn't be watching in the first place. That's the cost.
Right.
But I've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I've gotten back many more times than that. A couple examples. One of them, right after I fell to my knees in that summer, I was also in an entrepreneurship course, and I didn't realize that I was going to start a solar company or leave the alarm company that I was with. But there was one question. I can't remember a lot of that course. It was very, very good. I'd pick out some things from memory, but there's one question that was asked, one assignment that was given that completely altered what my life has looked like for the last 3 years. And that's what you're looking for in these coaching relationships or these courses. You're not going to take away everything. You can't. But if there's one or two impactful questions or slight question, it can change the course of your life. So for me, it was, if everything that you currently knew as your business today evaporated, now, what would you do tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. for the sake of your life, your family, and your future? And it wasn't a hypothetical. What do you think you'll do next in life? And it is from a very practical, pragmatic sense. At 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, when you wake up with nothing in terms of your career and whatever you have in terms of savings, what are you going to do? And I went home. I still remember standing in my pool with my wife, and I was explaining this question. I said, I know the answer. I would learn everything I need to know about the solar industry and figure out if it's as good as I think it might be. Frankly, I've kind of been selling myself that it's not that good, but that's because I've got this confirmation bias because I'm in a competing business of sorts.
Right.
And because there's a lot of direct sales in solar and in home security. So like that was a singular question, and the answer of it had me go and have a few hour-long conversations with friends. And within a half a day from that moment, I knew what I was doing. I was leaving what I had, the security and the nest egg and the residual from that company, and I was starting something from scratch. I mean, that's an example. And it's been, we've got over 100 people on our team, and we've serviced over 2,000 families. We have huge ambitions. None of that would have been possible had I not been open-minded and looking for the right questions to ask. There's another one. I could give so many. On a personal note, the Landmark and coaches that I've had that have done that work, they help to examine what are your preconceived notions and what they would call your filters for how you listen to people. So when I first took the Landmark Forum, I'm sitting in this room and they're talking about filters. I'd never heard that name before, but they said a filter is how you hear somebody. So today it's a bit more common to talk about this. The transformation is not a weird word. It's everywhere. But 20 years ago, it wasn't everywhere. Tony Robbins, Landmark, a few places talked about it, but it wasn't everywhere. And they're describing a filter, and they said, look, you might have your mom might call. Because the forum leader was talking with a gentleman in the front complaining about his mom. And he said, my mom nags at me all the time. She said, look, your mom might call you on your birthday and say, happy birthday, honey, I love you. But because of your filter, all you hear is nag, nag, nag. You're getting older. And my mom's a saint in my mind. So in my mind, I was like, that's not my mom. But it did click in that moment. I'm like, oh, interesting. My girlfriend, it has been quite a nag for quite some time. And then the next thing, like the second thought in an instant is, what if that's not true? What if she's not? And sometimes I used probably a 5-letter word with a B, not the NAG word. And like, that's the ugly truth of probably what I thought about our relationship. It was not going to last. And I heard about this thing called a filter. I realized I've been filtering my girlfriend, and all I hear and all I see is the bad stuff because I want to, or because there's some level of self-interest in it for me. And what was crazy about that moment is when I realized that the filter existed, simultaneously I saw her for who she was to me when I met her, which is, she's the mother of my 4 children, love of my life, a girl that I knew I wanted to marry, shortly after I started dating her. And she became that again to me in an instant.
Right.
because I understood something about how I viewed the world in a new way. And
I
it
love
only
that.
takes a few of those moments in life, in business, to understand the power of coaching, the power of questions, and the power of ongoing development. So
I love that.
I,
I
I
love that.
keep I keep
You
doing
know,
it.
you brought up a thought, and this is something I've learned just recently. I've heard people say it for a long time, but it goes something like, you get what you are. And so many people think opposites attract. And when you were talking about that filter, and most people I see struggling in life or complaining or they're frustrated with somebody, really they neglect looking at how they are the problem.
Yeah.
And they always are pointing outward at other people being the problem. I'm guilty of the same thing, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's such a valuable lesson. And it goes to the personal development thing. And okay, I'm too good to go learn something from somebody at something. Well, even if it was 10 grand, would it be worth it to spend 10 grand, 20 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand if you were going to pick up one thing like you did that's going to change you and all your relationships and every other aspect of your life for the better? Like,
Mm-hmm.
people don't think of it that way, and I just think it's so valuable as we're encountering challenges with family, with friends, with circumstances, with jobs, with businesses. I can't believe the struggles you go through as an entrepreneur. I'm earlier on my journey than you are, but just the thought of, like, how many years had you been in business before you just completely walked away and started something new?
I was yeah, I had been in that industry for 11 years and with that
Wow.
company for 9.
Right.
And I had a healthy amount of residual income that came in, more than enough to pay for everything in my life, and I had to leave that
Mm-hmm.
altogether and then go
Wow.
into business where we started and drained savings to almost nothing, and before it started building back up just in time. So,
Sure. Yeah, to create that momentum. That's so
but you
hard.
don't you but you're not who you could be in those moments if you
Right.
haven't became that person previously.
Right.
And I was at a course this last year, and we were talking about entrepreneurial journey. So you're earlier in yours. One of the challenges we have as entrepreneurs and as human beings is comparison. And well,
Mhm.
human beings compare, but
Right.
entrepreneurs, we definitely compare too.
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
it's part of
100%.
how we design process
Yeah.
and growth. But it's so easy to look
Right.
over at the other guy or the gal who is a
Right.
little bit younger, but who's got 5 times more momentum or 10 times more volume or just net worth or whatever it is, the
Right.
game that you're playing that you compare yourself to. And he
Mm-hmm.
said something that was really impactful. He said, you've got to understand your entrepreneurial birthday.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to compare yourself at all, you got to contextualize it a little bit better than age. Because
Yeah.
if, I didn't fully embrace what it meant to go be an entrepreneur until I was 36 years old. And
Right.
so if somebody else is 25, but they've been doing it since they're 18, and maybe they grew up with it in their family,
Mm-hmm.
we're not the same. And to compare myself and pretend that I'm losing or winning, it's of very little value. Now, if it motivates you to go and contribute more to others and develop more yourself, great. But
Right.
comparison is, as somebody said, this the thief of all joy. It's
Oh yeah.
tricky.
100%. I love that. Having that moment. I think I've recently had it. So I'm
Yeah.
really excited for the next couple of years, because you do kind of get discouraged. It's like, okay, I'm not as far along as I thought I was going to be 3 years ago, or whatever. Right. And then, just the joy and the peace of going, I've learned some hard lessons. I've gone through some ups and downs and losses, and some, part of
Yeah.
teams evaporating and things like that, like every entrepreneur goes through. And you kind of reach that point of, like, okay, I got to get real with myself, do that Jordan Peterson exercise where you sit on your bed and go,
Yeah.
okay, I know what I have to do now. And then the question is, are you willing to do what it takes?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And many people, that's kind of the hard entrepreneur question. And most people just aren't willing to do what it takes. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that if that's not your calling. I'm kind of curious. You mentioned your calling is helping people to realize their greatness. How did you land on your calling? How would you describe your calling to people? When did you feel called to have a bigger impact on the world?
So that course I was talking about, entrepreneurship and autonomy course, the one that had me ask the question standing in my pool about what would I do.
Yeah.
That's the other big take. That's the other big takeaway from that course is
Okay.
And I would say one of the intentions of that course is to get clear on your calling and who it is God put you on this planet to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a lot of reading, thinking, and writing in that period of time to try to crystallize what that was for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think calling is always going to involve contributing to others, because we're meant to contribute to others. We're meant to be in relationship to others. A true calling is going to provide positive impact to others. Mm-hmm. And for me, I think it's somewhat related to my journey. I think all of our callings are related to our journey in life.
Right.
But as I continue to discover more about who it is that I could be for the world, and mm-hmm. and that may sound really big and grandiose, and it's just the way that things occur to me. Mm-hmm. And I pursue that. I realize that it's a very individual journey for me. Mm-hmm. And everybody's got that. Everybody's got some maximum capacity to contribute to the world. And the sooner, for the most part, the sooner you realize what that capacity is, and the more intentionally you pursue it, the more likely it is that you achieve it, or the more of it that gets achieved. Right. And I don't know why, but I just love helping people to discover that journey is available. Mm-hmm. And if at all possible, help them to take the first few steps or help them along the way.
It's exciting, man.
Growth is one of the most pure forms of happiness and fulfillment. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't, and the proof, everybody's got proof in their life of this, because you look at where you are, where you were a year ago, and if you've made progress, and it doesn't matter if you compare yourself to anybody else, it really doesn't matter. If you look back at where you were and you made progress, you'll mm-hmm. immediately have a sense of pride and accomplishment if you take the time to look back. Mm-hmm. And if that means you went from making $30,000 a year, and again, this is just one measurement of value, so money is definitely not the only. We could talk about many things, but it's easy to quantify. But if you went from making 30 to 50 to 70 to 150 to 500, you're going to feel great about that, because the mm-hmm. growth is there. And you're going to feel similarly great as the person who went from 1 million to 3 million to 5 million to 50 million. It does 100%. Not matter the volume, it matters the growth. And that's true spiritually. That's mm-hmm. true emotionally. It's true for your relationships. I mean, it's why people who have been married 50 years and the lucky ones who have a deeper relationship at 50, mm-hmm. not just than that they had at 20 or 25 or when they were 22 years old, but my goal is to have a deeper relationship at 50 than I had at 49 years. I mean, that's, and if you like Chick-fil-A, for example, Dan Cathy, that company has grown 72 years in a row. Right. 72 years. Yes, the money gets big at some point, but the fulfillment and the contribution that happens as a consequence of growth mm-hmm. is undeniably good.
I absolutely love that. I know you're a leader and a student of leadership. I'm reminded of Maxwell and his story, one of the most famous leaders and authors on leadership. I don't think he had nowadays, if you hire Maxwell to give a talk, I think an hour talk would cost you about $500,000 to get his time. But he didn't do his first paid speaking gig until he was, I believe, 47 or 48. Wow. And so, I think it's really important just to remember, and I was thinking back on my life the other day, I've heard, you ever listen to Earl Nightingale, The Greatest Secret or Strangest Secret in the World? Most people, when they actually have had goals, they've probably the vast majority of the time achieved those in their life, whether it's going to college or graduating high school or making a sports team or, getting married, having kids, owning a house.
The things that they always saw themselves doing.
Right. Exactly. But most people, they're like, for some reason, they're afraid to imagine or see themselves doing anything bigger. Maybe it's the fear of failure. Maybe it's the criticism of others who say like, man, who are you to think you can do something great or change the world or start a podcast that's going to be in 38 countries or whatever GLE's in now. Like, it's just amazing if you think back to the things you've actually, maybe written down or planned for in your life. I bet anybody listening, you've probably achieved the vast majority of them. So, think bigger. Let's
Yeah.
figure out ways to think bigger. And, if you feel that calling of making impact, you can make an impact right where you are, in your family, in your business, in the people you encounter day to day, knocking on doors, going to coffee shops, wherever you're going. It's just so cool. We're enjoying this conversation with you, Peter. This is really fun. If y'all aren't following Peter, go follow him. He's at P as in Paul, V as in Victor, Swenson, Swenson, at PV Swenson on Instagram, Peter Swenson on LinkedIn and Facebook. His company, Genesis Power Solutions, at Genesis Power Solutions on Insta, or the website, www.gps.solar. And you got a podcast coming out soon?
Yeah. So we have I guess I would say restarted, regenerated, revived a podcast that we launched. Our first launch was right about the same time GLE launched, right before the first month of COVID. And we went into hibernation a bit in reality, physically, and so did the podcast. We brought it back last year. We just relaunched it this last week. Actually, is the first one on there, Colin? Not yet. Okay, so tomorrow technically is our third, and I will commit to final relaunch. So that is my brother and I nice. Talking about life, leadership, sales, growth. We've done life together. We've ran businesses together. We both have kids. We live close to each other. We own the company together. We both have twins, actually, surprisingly
wow
enough. Yeah, we have 4-year-old twins. Mine is a boy girl, and then his is a boy boy, and they all go to school together. It's kind of crazy.
That's awesome.
But yeah, we grew up in theater, and so just sharing and talking and presenting, like, it's always been fun and a passion for us. So it's awesome, exciting, man, to make some more steps towards just sharing more of our journey with others, so they can shortcut some steps. Because it really is in the podcast world, it's about seeking wisdom. Yes, there's entertainment, but if you can learn from we'll talk about John Maxwell, for example, $500,000 to have him speak for an hour live, but in an hour, he could never compress the amount of wisdom that you could distill from one of his books. Any one of his books will be more valuable than the $500,000 that you have to spend to see him in person, or that somebody would. And a podcast are similar, but there is just so much content filled with, to the brim with wisdom. And for those of you that are looking to grow, and maybe it isn't a $10,000 course. I did not start there. I've done that, but I did not start there. For me, it was, $500 was a lot when I started paying for courses or development.
Sure.
But books were cheaper than that and more accessible. And it's just a matter of seeing yourself bigger than you are today, and recognizing that there is a gap to be filled. So when I look at what we're doing at Genesis right now, we're playing a very big game. We have some incredibly talented people on the team, internally and partnerships externally, and we are casting vision bigger than we know how to fill. To be really clear, I do not know how to go build a company that does $1 billion in sales yet, but I know that it's possible. I know I'm capable, and as you get more clear about that vision, and if it's compelling, and especially if you're enrolling a lot of other people in it, you got no other option. I don't have an option but to get better. I'm either a liar to everybody that I've cast a vision to and with, or I'm going to do what it takes. And my history and my identity is that I will do what it takes, but I'm not there yet. Right. So I think to your point about dreaming and having a vision and seeing clearly, when we do that, consistently, we are forced to either be a liar to ourselves or to step up to the challenge. And more often than not, we're going to step up to the challenge.
I love it. Boom. We're up on time. I usually ask a final question, but that nugget can be taken into 3 or 4 future generations and probably change countless lives. Peter, this has been a blast, man. Thank you so much for making some time to join me today on Go Lead Everything, man.
Absolutely, Phil. Happy to be on and appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you and everybody listening in the GLE Nation.
I've got a question for you before you sign off here.
Uh-oh.
What is your simple question?
This isn't how it works, Peter. I'm the interviewer.
So what is your ultimate vision for GLE, the impact in the community?
I am building a international network of strong leaders in a world starving for leadership. And we want to have an international network of millions of leaders around the world. And that's our goal.
Awesome.
And we're just empowering people, everyday people in all walks of life, because we, the people, can really make a difference. And somewhere along the way, we forgot that and gave over our ownership, gave over our responsibility to people who manipulate it and take advantage of us and enslave us through usury and all sorts of other things. And we could probably talk about all that on a whole new episode.
Yes, probably.
But yeah, man, we need individual people to stand up right in their homes and stop sending their kids to government schools and take ownership for getting the finances in place to actually take care of their family to the level that they need to in this world. So that's part of it, man.
I'm aligned. I'm on the same mission.
Awesome, brother.
And every community, as small as they may be, the family, the neighborhood, the church group, that like every micro community, they still need leaders. And I think, to your point, I think many people have allowed somebody else to bear the weight of that responsibility, and it's time for the general population to step up.
100%. And I think it goes to your experience in faith. People have lost their identity. They don't know who they are, and they especially don't know whose they are. Mm-hmm. And we are powerful children. We are kings of the King, and we are entrusted with the earth to be stewards, because none of this is ours, right? Our families, our money, we're to be good stewards of what's been given to us. So I appreciate your support, brothers. If there's anything I can do to help you, I would do it. And I appreciate your support here too, man.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Everybody in GLE Nation, as you go, lead everything.